My name is Amy Marks, CEO of XSite Modular. We want to give you a behind-the-scenes tour of one of our modular cable landing stations being constructed in the factory. Please remember that some of these spaces are unfinished, and if you'd like, you can click on the links below to take your own self-guided tour.
So we're standing in cable room 1. This facility is designed to house ultimately 3 cable systems. This is cable room 1, you've got cable room 2, and then cable room 3. The initial implementation is just the power and cooling for cable room 1, since the other cables are future. You've got your DC secondary distribution here. Your B plant is here, and your A plant is there. All of the PFE equipment, the power feed equipment, is going to be here. That's what feeds the repeaters along the route. You've got all your overhead cable tray to distribute your DC cabling to all the equipment that's going to be in this room. You've also got the yellow fiber duct, which is going to be for all the fiber distribution throughout the space to interconnect all the different pieces of equipment and for them to communicate with the outside world. Over there, you've got your cooling. You've got all your grounding, fire alarm, and then over here you've got your cable entry where the cable comes into the facility. Our client in this case is the landing party, right? So they have currently need for 1 cable that's landing, international cable that's landing,
Right.
and they have desire to get tracked future cables as well.
Yeah.
So there's 3 cable rooms here. This is cable room 1, and this is the only one that's currently planned for in use. Our initial implementation is just to fit out cable room 1, and then that cage back there is a meet me area so that they can communicate with the outside world. And that's all that's initially required as part of this initial build. They did want to fit out the space, even though there's not cooling or the DC plant or anything that's powered for the additional spaces of cable room 2 and cable room 3. And then there's also a co-location facility here, which would be more like a data center. This is the power room. This, along with the exterior generators, form the power block. You can also get interior generators. You've got in here the AC switching equipment, which will switch between utility power, generator power, and in this case there's 2 generators, so it will also switch between generator A and generator B. You've got your main distribution panel, which distributes the AC power throughout the building. In this particular building, it's a telecommunication building, so all the equipment is run off DC power. So here you've got a redundant DC power plant, which rectifies the AC power into DC power, stores it in batteries, and then distributes that out to the equipment. And like I said, on this particular one, it's a 2-end system, so if the B system goes out, you've got the A system, which is completely capable of carrying the entire load of the building, which on this case for a 4-hour period. You've also got 10-foot high ceilings, FM200, which is a clean agent fire suppression system. On the back wall, you've got your HVAC system, which controls temperature, humidity, maintains a positive air pressure with respect to the outside environment, and also handles your emergency exhaust during a hydrogen event.
Even on our telco side now, we see a lot of hybrid AC and DC buildings, and we do a lot of hybrid for people because the intention is it's going to start as a telco building and it turns into being like a mini data center. Right. So that's the intention of this one as well. So I would say more often than not, these are turning into hybrid cable and data center stations, you know, and the lines are a bit blurred at this point between the two of them, depending on what's going on. So we, as you can see, we use, again, we're indifferent to the equipment, but we have our own equipment that we like better. You know, usually they're space saving or operationally they're better for the client. So I always like to say, because we don't build equipment, because we're agnostic, like if you go to the equipment manufacturers, you might get their first in class, you know, one piece of equipment, but they also want to sell you their 5th in class piece of equipment. And like, to me, I want to give you first in class for everything. You know, to me, I don't have a corporate shareholder on top of me saying like, sell all of our stuff and aggregate it in that box. You know, I don't really care. I want to give you the best equipment, whatever is right for you and specified for you.
So this is the main entrance to the building. So if guests come, the main entrance there is a rear entrance for equipment deliveries, and there's a staging area
We don't care what the support space looks like. If you want this to be a full-blown office with 15 offices and 10 conference rooms, you can have that. And we build mods to make that happen. In this case, they wanted a very small support space, and that's what we can give them. But really, multi-story space, Class A office space, anything can be added on to this that you want. And I think you can see the gracious ceiling heights that we have in some of these buildings as well. So again, like if you walked into a containerized product, it would not feel like this. You know, I like to say the most exciting thing is it looks just like a building, and the least exciting thing is it looks just like a building when you're here.
These ceilings are 10 foot high. We've also gone as high as 12 feet.
Our standard support module just has a small little like 10 by 12 office, bathroom, a little kitchenette, and then also a mop sink area.
We do a lot of viewing walls and things like that.
Fire rated wall here between this space and the equipment space. Fire rated glass window as well, so they can see into the equipment space, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And the idea is to have 2 desks in here so they can have people working and be able to monitor the space and work the facility. So some of the other systems that you'll see installed, you've got the FM200 fire suppression. You've got the fire alarm. You've got the VESDA, which is the orange piping that you see above. And that detects a fire before there's a fire. It'll detect smoldering wire. Well, all the devices we use, included in the base price of our building is the included BMS, which will communicate with all the different devices, the DC plant, the ATS, the generators, the UPSs, pretty much all the temperature, humidity sensors, differential pressure, everything comes back to these. There's 3 of them. They're HVAC controllers, and they'll pick up everything and they'll communicate. So if a client never wanted to do a single thing else, they'd have a fully integrated BMS where they could look at all the cameras, the access control, motion sensors, everything will be monitored. Comes with a graphical web-based user interface that they can go to. If they happen to have their own, it's all, BACnet, Modbus, it's all, so they can tie into whatever system they have. If they have a legacy system that they want to do, we were just talking to our other client who they currently have a Siemens system. They're going to want to integrate into that for their future buildings. Not a problem whatsoever. This is your security system, your access control server. They're obviously working on the cameras there. That's the network video recorder for the camera system, so that'll keep up to 60 days of video storage. On this particular system, we do have an intercom system so that someone can come to the front door, buzz in, and it'll notify them in here on the little camera, and they can see and speak to the person coming in. That's the mate line right there. So we like to make sure it's all pre-cut, pre-fitted, so that when we get into the field, it just snaps back in place, right? And that'll obviously be finished like everything else in the building. And same thing with the floor. So this is where 2 mods come together. So this fencing actually crosses the mate line, so this will get demounted and shipped loose, which is why you'll see it's not fully in. This is what we call a mate line clip. So this is where the 2 concrete slabs meet, and what that does is that ties those 2 slabs together so that they, as there's deflection, as these floors are loaded up, they move as one, and so that you won't get cracking or anything along the seam. And so you'll see even the floor finish. So here's the floor tile that's put in. You'll see it over there. We stop it at this mate line, and so it's exactly, they're 12-inch tiles. It's at exactly either 12 inches or 24 inches, so that basically once we get into the field, we can just put those missing tiles down. And again, there won't be a joint there. There won't be some sort of seam or
tile glued to the cement.
Correct. Yeah, this is an anti-static flooring, so it's a special glue.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's adhered directly to the concrete. Right. So once this gets bolted in, it'll get patched with concrete,
right,
smoothed over, and then the floor finish will go over that. You'll see this is the same mate line piece here. So again, it'll be like that. So that's the extent of what you'll be able to see is, okay, I might see a slightly different sized panel where the 2 mods meet, but other than that, it's indistinguishable. You can't really, unless you really know what you're looking for, can't see where one module starts and another stops.
So this is a stone aggregate panel that we really like. It's embedded in fiberglass, and so it's literally indestructible, and it actually helps with some of the blast-proof rating.
Yeah.
But it it mimics the look of exposed aggregate concrete.
It has a good look.
I
mean,
like
it's
it.
nice.
I mean, I like the gray. It comes in a
Yeah.
bunch of different colors, but you could hit this with a hammer. It gets soaked under like salt water. It is indestructible. And we have some other selections for facades that clients can choose from. But I think most of our clients want it to be nondescript.
Yeah.
So it's a good product for that, right? Unlike containers that have joints or gaskets where the two containers come together, we're actually at our mate lines where the modules come together, we're actually completing construction. So just like you would on site, you would actually never know the difference between one part of our building and another where the mate line is. We're doing caulk joints and we're actually putting down house wrap as well as exterior gyp and then our enclosure panel. So it's a layered approach every time we do our mate lines to make sure that the environment doesn't get the best of our building so that we don't have any water infiltration. That's very different than a containerized building. The containers, gaskets, and joints will definitely leak. This layered approach is a tested 50-year plus lifespan building that you will never know the difference between this or a conventionally built building, with the exception of that this is built in a controlled environment and the materials are actually put together by skilled staff that are the same team that has done these buildings over and over again. I think also the thing that I always like to point out when we're standing in these spaces is you can have lots of column-free space within your equipment rooms, and I think people don't recognize that when they are thinking about going modular or if they use the containerized word. They think that these are not going to be high ceilings and wide open clear spans. And I mean, literally, if you stand in this building and if you look down this space, infinitum, you could have clear span going forever.
Right.
Because I'm just going to put mods all the way next to this going on and on and on and on and on. So like, I never have to worry about putting a giant column in the middle of your equipment room. And that's the difference with our system and other companies. I think structurally, we make the most robust building on the market, and we are able to go clear span and tall ceilings for whatever size that you want. I think that really sets us apart. And not only can we go into those spaces and those shapes, but also have them be robust for seismic and wind or blast resistant. So you really get the best of all worlds. Exactly, so wherever it's going. But really, and I think that's the part that people don't recognize how wide open these spaces are. That's one of the great things about our floor loading as well. So we're able to move things around because we have such a robust building, such robust floors. Containerized systems are using plywood on the floor and just thin metal boxes on the exterior panel. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so vocal about the fact that these are not containers. You're getting a much, you don't have thermal bridging issues on the exterior wall. You don't have to deal with like different floor load situations. You're not dealing with a structure that you've cut up. It's just a very robust, totally, completely different building system, much superior to traditional building even, right? So like, that's what really hard for us to get across unless you've walked in and felt it and, for yourself to understand how robust it is.
So what happens, like for an overseas install, when they're ready for 2 and 3? Do they
Great
come
question.
back to you?
They do.
And do you send your team back out?
We do.
with
We
the
build them here and we send them back out. And also, as they want to make the space operational, we have blocked out in the framing for the additional AC units. So it's a very easy addition to add additional power and cooling because we know that in advance, and it's literally a very quick turnover.
But they don't have to pay for the equipment up front.
They don't. I mean, sometimes depending on how they want to scale, it just really depends on how much they want to scale and when they want to scale. Sometimes it's better to buy a little bit additional power and cooling up front, and then we're just giving them equipment room modules because they've already purchased enough cooling and power. Sometimes it's better just to cut the power and cooling where it is and block out for additional cooling units, and then know we're going to either, in this case, put on additional external generators, or we want to add, generator rooms onto this. Yeah. Either way, it's a completely flexible system to add just additional modules as you scale up.
Correct.
And that's both horizontally, if we want to do it on the site, or if you're urban, to go vertically. So we can add additional floors if you're just going, like we did a cable station in Columbia that actually takes 3 stories because they are in a more of an urban space, a little bit tighter space, and they needed to go up as opposed to out.
This building does have several different growth stages planned for it. So the generators in the power plant will supply, so they have an end-of-life capacity that they plan on supporting. The generators and the infrastructure, I'll say, is currently, at the initial implementation, will support roughly half of that end-of-life capacity. Then there's the current power plant that we have in there is about maybe 60 or 70% of that capacity. So what they can do is they can expand this space as needed, build that out, and then once they max that out, they can even double that yet again, like we saw in the video. And there's another module, this doorway planned for the end of the hallway here, and then there's another yet power room that's identical to this that will feed the other half. So you'll basically have 2 utility feeds coming in, 4 sets of generators, 2 sets of AC power plants, 4 sets of DC power plants, all powering this equipment. And the same thing with the cooling is that, there's 2 units here, 2 units there, 2 units there, 2. So the end build out, I think, is 10 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 AC units. As Amy said, the framing is there, so all we have to do is just cut a hole in that little finish, mount that unit. In this one, they didn't want to add equipment space. They wanted to build out the building with the full equipment space there. But we can also add that. So our initial plan for this building was that we were going to stop the building 1 mod short, since why build the space if you don't need it, until you have that 3rd cable coming in, why bother? But no, that was one of their requirements. They wanted that space all day one. So they've got the space for their full capacity, but they've only got power and cooling for roughly 20% or 30% of their overall end of life. And that allows them to keep their initial expense down. And if they want to add it, they can just, buy AC units, and we can then, we don't even have to build the modules here. We just have the equipment shipped. Our crews go down there. They mount the units on the outside. The batteries are hot pluggable. You just put them in. The rectifiers are hot pluggable. So you can just keep adding and adding and adding without having any impact on, the operation of the existing facility. And not on this product, we can also then, like we're doing for the Brazil one, we're adding additional space right next to it. So we're even increasing the equipment space without taking down the initial facility. And so it's remaining operational by building a temporary wall, taking that down, building on.
I love I've actually had a prospect client that we now built for since. But when we were first talking to them, they said, here's our requirements. We helped them understand the feasibility of the building, and then we sent them some drawings, and they saw some videos and some pictures. And I talked to them for maybe a few months, then they came to the factory for a tour like this. And when we were in the office before they came to the building, he said, I don't understand why you just can't flat pack this whole building. And I said, why don't we walk out and see what the building looks like before we ask that again? And literally, he walked out here and he said, oh my God, I did not realize, this is what my building looks like exactly on site. I didn't realize it was going to be this finished and this tested and this done. And he was like, and even with all the, holding hands all through that time, I think if you haven't walked through one of the buildings and seen what it's capable of and actually what you can get customized and how tall things can be, how wide things can be, anything you want, it's really hard to conceptualize 3-dimensional spaces, I think, for people. And
it's hard for them to conceptualize when they're standing in it.
Right, even when you're standing in it. And in the U.S. in particular, if you're doing shipping within the U.S., it changes a lot. We can go wider with mods, taller with mods, because we're not going very far. Oftentimes, we're going to a sweet spot to not just be on the truck, but to be on the ship, to come off the ship, to go into some truck that's available in another remote location. So within the U.S., we are really available to go to lots of different sizes. And we've shipped mods as long as 65 feet within the U.S. and 20 feet wide. So in reality, it's just going to be where it's going and where we're going to put it. I think the other thing you want to understand about our buildings, too, is that these are fully integrated buildings with the systems completed within the factory. So a lot of times people don't quite understand that. They think the building will come and then we'll be fitting it out on site. And that's actually the opposite of what we want. We want to completely integrate all of the systems into the building here in the factory, test them, pre-test them before they're shipped out, get them to the site, and then quickly get you up online once we're in the location. Anything that we can put into the building before it ships, we're doing it. And that's important. And a lot of places, the reason we do that is there may not be a Home Depot down the block if we're on a small island or in Africa or somewhere else that we know that we can get to. So we are used to making sure that everything we need to make sure this building is functional comes with the building and comes from the factory, because the labor we have here is as the same labor that follows out our buildings on site. And so we'd like to do it here in the controlled environment as much as possible than go out on the job site itself.
We don't know what sort of equipment they're going to be installing. The client doesn't even know what they're going to be installing in 5, 10, 15 years. So what we do is we use a pretty flexible system where we just have a unistrut grid, 10 foot, so that they can pretty much, if you'll notice, this cross aisle cable tray could literally go anywhere. You could even, after the fact, if you wanted to change it, you can just, loosen up those bolts,
Yes.
slide that whole thing over 2 feet, 1 foot, 6 inches, for whatever you need to do, and then you don't need to completely reinstall your entire cable tray system. So there's a lot of systems like that we start doing all the layout and coordination to give you an incredibly flexible system so that it's easy to make changes and it's easy to accommodate for the unknown. Because who really knows where technology is going to be in 5, 10, 15 years.
And that our building will be flexible to accept it. That's actually what we
Yeah.
also know. That's what we've really been trying to work towards, to make our clients be able to adapt to whatever comes, right? And what their capacities are going to be, what the equipment's going to be, where the layouts are going to change. We want that all to be. That's one of the great things about our floor loading as well. So we're able to move things around because we have such a robust building, such robust floors.
Yeah.
At XSite Modular, we are design builders of critical infrastructure buildings, including cable stations and data centers, and we build them on 6 of the 7 continents. So as we're designing for these buildings, we are vendor agnostic to the equipment that needs to be specified, either by the client or by ourselves if you don't have partners you want to work with. So unlike some of our competitors that are actually equipment manufacturers trying to aggregate all of their different kinds of equipment within the building, some of which are pretty good in their categories and some of which may not be very good in their category, we are picking best-in-class equipment across all areas of our building. Not just best-in-class, but also equipment that can be serviced within your areas, whether you're in an urban or a local environment.
Our buildings go to pretty remote places, so one of the things we have to select our equipment with that in mind, meaning it needs to be able to be supported in that local region, right? You just can't
Service,
pick
maintenance.
all the voltage. I mean, this is not US voltage. This is 380 volts, 60 hertz. Sometimes we have 50 hertz, sometimes we have 480 volt, 220 volt. Every single building, you'll notice the receptacles all in this building are universal. So either we'll buy the local one there or we'll put in a universal. But we always have to be building everything so that it can be serviced and replaced by local parts and pieces.
And also built to that local code.
Correct.
So everything we're building here, if it's going to a different location, is built to that code within that location.
Meets at a minimum US code is our minimum. So even if it's not required there, we still build that to the US standard. And then if there are local variances from that, we also do that, like they have certain wiring in each country, standards and stuff like that we follow. But on like the fuel tanks, even if a double wall tank isn't needed, we still provide a double wall tank. Same thing on all the fire ratings.